how your experiences as a young boy and a young man in Somalia have impacted on the way you report and how you report.
I think it had a huge influence. To start, the reason I became a journalist was basically because of my experience. That's what I normally put down to it. And I mean, when I came here in 1999, at the beginning, it's not easy to adapt a new country where you don't speak the language when you're on your own. So it took me a while to adapt life here and I've done lots of different works. Uh, and and then I have always asked myself, what is my role in this world? And as I said, growing up in Somalia, I saw the worst any human being could see, especially as a child. I mean, seeing killings and shootings and dead bodies every day was just part of a daily life in Somalia. And I saw lots of bad things happening, and I kind of thought I could probably do some sort of positive contribution to the society, in particular Somalis, because I am a Somali. And that is where the whole idea of becoming a journalist came. I looked into politics and other subjects, and I thought politicians are probably, most of them, corrupt, whether it's morally or financially. So I thought journalism, I could do few things like exposing bad guys, corruption and abuses, and also highlighting important issues, that sort of thing. So yes, I would say to become a journalist, the influence came from my background, and still it influences me because the stories I most enjoy doing are the most horrible ones, if you like. Because simply, if I can expose bad guys, if I can save someone from suffering, for me that's a huge success. I remember when I was at university, my classmates were saying I want to become a fashion journalist, sports journalist, and they thought I was the odd one out in a way because I said I wanted to become a war reporter or report from troubled places. So and those are the ones. I mean, you don't enjoy the process of making the story. It has an effect on me psychologically, mentally, I would say, especially when you have lived here in this country and you have seen the kind of lifestyle people have, and you haven't seen death and destruction for a while. It affects you mentally, but I think for me, it's well worth going through that, I would say, mental trouble and psychological pain in order to save and help others, hopefully. And I hope I'm doing a good thing. And I look at back every story I do, and I can see some positives in it.
Watch some of your reporting from Somalia, and one thing that became very clear to me is that you're very courageous in reporting on corruption and some of the ugliness and some of the critical issues for Somalia. But I felt within your reporting there was a real empathy for the people of Somalia, that somehow you managed to expose the corruption, do that job. But I felt like you never lost the humanity of the people you were reporting on and about. And I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about that.
Yes, I think obviously I think it comes down to my background because I am a Somali, and the main reason I'm doing this is I care about my people. So to start, I am not there to demonize them or to say bad things about them. I am there to help them in a way. So I think that a lot of people have said to me, we can see that from your work. And I mean, when I come back to London and I have a producer and editor who have never been to Somalia, it's always a huge challenge to say, this is not the case, let's do this way, let's do that way. And it's a struggle. I would admit it is a struggle to convince people, sometimes my colleagues, and say it's not what you think. Let's not look at from the side you think. let's look at from this side because I am the one who did the story. So I think it comes down to my background, and also every story I do, I look at it from a human perspective. As much as I am a Somali and care about my people, I look at it from a human perspective. And I remember one story I did in 2009. I did not voice that story, but it was exposing corruption within the UN food program called the World Food Program. And one of the big issue was I said I would like to meet some of the victims. My commissioning editor wanted us to just expose and say bad things are happening without showing the victims. And it took me a while to convince him and say, if we say this is happening and we are not showing victims of this corruption, then the story won't make a big sense. And I managed to convince him. So it's always a difficult one to do and explain to my bosses, although in a way I'm lucky because my current editor and foreign news editor both know Somalia quite well, and they trust me and my judgments, and often my decision is the final decision, which is not the case for many journalists. But I would say I have earned that respect from them because I have managed to stick to my principle as a journalist and forget all the other packages and politics and just do a simple human suffering, if you like. And I think people appreciate that. And that is one thing I want to continue doing it. And as I said, it's a challenge. I mean, I was editing a story today and we had a few arguments about how we're going to treat the story. So, but it's part of the job. And I think as long as I try my best and portray the characters that I meet as best as I can, then I think I am in the right direction. So, and that's what I will continue doing.
I imagine one of the things that comes up is often there's stereotypical images when you're reporting from war zones or when you're reporting in difficult situations. You know, the gunfights, the poverty, the dead bodies, and some of those are very ethically complex issues to work out when you're telling a story. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, or I'm trying to understand like what the dilemmas
Yeah,
might be in that editing room?
the dilemma is working for a Western media and reporting from Africa is always a challenge. Journalist, which I consider I am not, though I have lived here for many years and I am a British citizen. If you're a Western journalist, many of them, I would say, they already have a preconceived idea of what Africa looks like. So sometimes they decide their story before even they get there. And which means you expect them to portray or not to have empathy for those victims. And often the reports comes across as bad Africans are killing bad Africans or bad Africans are dying for hunger. And it's always that, but it's not that. For me, on many occasions, I see victims of drought or victims of corruption or victims of bad politics or victims of whatever. And that's how I look at them. I don't look at them as Africans who are up to no good, and I always distinguish between the bad and the good ones, if you like, and that's how I normally approach. So I'm not talking about filming these I would say controversial sort of pictures, if you like, but I'm talking about how people treat the story and
So it's
how
the editorial aspects of the story that you're trying to get moved a little bit.
It is the editorial, and these editorials make a huge difference in terms of the story and how you treat the story, whether you tell from the perspective of the people that you are reporting from or whether you tell from your own perspective. And that's the difference, I think. So for a Western journalist might start saying something like a war-torn Somalia, a chaos, this, but I don't normally go down that road. I might mention we have had some trouble but I always start normally with characters and tell their stories as humanely as possible. And as I said, while many other journalists would focus on Africans and how bad they are and don't necessarily distinguish between victims and perpetrators. And that's what I mean.
You see more than just bad guys and bad guys, and that your stories are very much kind of looking and trying to distinguish between the people who live with the conflict and the people who are perpetuating the conflict. And there were a couple of stories you did. The Race Against All Odds was a lovely story, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about how that came to be.
Yeah, the idea came to me because I go back to East Africa, in particular Somalia, quite often, and every time I go there, I come across few interesting ideas. And when I met these guys I was on another assignment, and I met them, and I had asked them few questions, and I talked to their trainer, if you like, or teacher, and as soon as I had a conversation with them, their stories struck me, and I thought, wow, what a great story. And then when I came back, I remember I didn't go through the normal procedure of writing a proposal and pitching to the editor. I remember I came back from a lunch break, and I told my editor, I can do a story about Somali athletes training in Mogadishu. And immediately he said to me, it's a done deal, let's do it. Because he knows Somalia, and he immediately, within seconds, he saw that it would be a brilliant story. But sometimes it's how you treat those stories, and I'm coming back to your question earlier on. And what I wanted to do was to show the human resilience, if you like, and these guys, and how everything is against them, everything. The whole environment is against them, yet they are prepared to wake up 5 a.m. in the morning to run, because they were saying our country needs us most. Today, if we cannot represent our nation, then we are not Somalis. And they were saying sports brings people together, and we don't want to be absent from the Olympics, and that's why we are training very hard. Mm-hmm. These guys had no money at all, at all. The clothes they were getting were sent by other people, ex-sportsmen, sportswomen, sometimes going to second-hand places to buy something. And the biggest issue was their safety. I mean, I spent a week with them, and every single day, we were threatened by militiamen from different groups. And we came close to being shot at and killed a few times. And when I saw on the first day, and I went back to my hotel in the evening, I remember I cried for about an hour, because I thought, wow. And these guys were prepared to take the risk, were prepared to suffer, in a way to sacrifice, because they wanted to represent their nation. They wanted to make all Somalis proud. They wanted to unite the country. And I thought, I am a Somali, and I should be prepared to take the risk with them, to tell their stories. And sometimes when you meet such characters, you kind of forget your own safety. You think, I am one of them, let's go for it. And that is how I did the story. So there was a great deal of risk in terms of being killed, and as I said, psychologically, meeting their families who have nothing to eat, seeing how they live, seeing how they survive. All those things were mentally and physically a huge challenge. But as I said, I just wanted to tell their stories. And that's
what... For people who don't understand it, why were they at risk running? Like, can you explain the cultural risks that they were taking in doing the training?
Yeah, there were a number of factors. I mean, Somalia, I would say we have had a trouble for the last 20-something years. Things are getting better now, and hopefully it will continue. But when I filmed them in 2010, I think it was, 11 was, in Mogadishu, the capital city where they were training, Al-Shabaab, an Islamist group which is linked to Al-Qaeda, which uses suicide bombings and roadside bombings, were in control of most of Mogadishu. The remaining of Mogadishu were in the hands of the Somali government, supported by African Union soldiers from Uganda and Burundi. So Mogadishu was a war zone, and these guys were running the front line of the war. Literally, on one side, you had Al-Shabaab fighters pointing their guns to everyone passing by. On the other, you have African Union soldiers who are watching any Al-Shabaab movements. And that's where they were running, because that was the best tarmac road, they said, that could be close to an Olympic stadium, to an Olympic track and field, if you like. So they said this is the best training route, and we had to do this. So every morning they would wake up and run through the front line, and it was locally known as the Road of Death, because every day dozens of people were dying because of the crossfire between the two different groups. Every day, dozens of people were dying. So these guys were just running it and thinking, I'm just gonna run. And also culturally, because Mogadishu was a war zone and people are not familiar with athletes who are training, people were thinking, why these guys are running? Some of the locals were thinking, are they mad because they are skinny?
Yeah,
Some people,
they were
you
quite thin. Yeah.
you should go and find someone to eat, something to eat. Some people on the street, rather than supporting them, they were saying, you should find something to eat, you're too skinny. And also some of these militiamen who are, most of them on drugs, they use a locally known drug called cat.
Yeah.
And they don't sleep at night. They would just see these athletes being close to them and they point the guns to them. Stop, stop, stop. So because the athletes, they just want to continue running. They don't want any interruption. They were getting interrupted by so many times, and which was not helping, let alone their safety, but their training, if you like. So they were facing so many challenges, and they were running through the front line between Al-Shabaab and African Union soldiers who were supporting the government, and they were taking those risks. And also in terms, I expected them to have some sort of a gym or somewhere where they can exercise. They never had any of this. They would train and they would go onto the sea to swim, and they say this is our the equivalent of our gym. This is where we exercise. This is what we do. So it was a tough environment to train and think I can compete against like Usain Bolt or Mo Farah or the likes, who are millionaires, who have everything they want, all the support, whether it's finance, training. And these guys were saying, I'm going to compete against those big boys. So, and that was a huge challenge. And they were prepared to take the risk. So that's what
I was wondering, watching the stories, whether you're operating your own camera at that point, and are you on your own there, Jamal, and doing the camera work as well as the reporting work?
Yes. Then I was filming it. Now I have a cameraman, but then I was filming it and reporting and producing. So I was, in a way, a one-man team. All I had was a driver. That's it. So sometimes I would get off the car and run after them. I wasn't as fit as they are, but I would get few shots, and then we would drive past them, stop, and then film them. Sometimes we film them through the window. So that's what we were doing, to get various shots.
Mm-hmm.
I was filming and reporting and producing.
And what do you do for your own safety in those situations? Are you wearing a flak jacket? Are you protected at all?
Not at all. And this is, again, whenever you're going to those places, this is the thing that you have to convince your bosses and the safety people that I don't need a flak jacket. I can survive without it. Because wearing a flak jacket means you attract attention. People think you are different. That's what they automatically assume. And also the African Union soldiers wear a flat jacket, so I didn't want to be seen as one of these soldiers, if you like. And no, I was just wearing normal clothes and doing my job. And as I said, on the first day when I thought I was much more than motivated than before. And I thought, if they are taking this risk, I will take with them to tell their story. So I think there was that motivation behind it, and for practical reasons, I couldn't wear flak jackets because
Yeah.
I would endanger my life rather than do anything to save me. I think one of the thing I focus on whenever I am reporting, which I think again distinguishes me from a typical Western journalist, is that I don't normally focus on myself. I always say the story is not about me, it's about them. And for instance, the story you mentioned about the athletes, there was a time where as I was filming, we were nearly shot at and killed, and I put down the camera. I was scared. But then even when we were here editing, my producer said, you should sort of express yourself. And I said, no, I'm not. It was about them. And I said, I thought they were going to be killed rather than saying we were going to be killed, or I felt this. So one of the thing I do whenever I am covering those places is always consider and focus the story is not about me, it's about them. But for many journalists, I think, and I have seen this on many occasions, they think this whole flak jacket things and sounding fearful and saying, oh, this is happening, I think this, I feel that, they think it adds drama to their story, and that's the main reason they do. And in fact, I remember one British journalist who was in Mogadishu, and I watched a piece to camera. If you understand piece to camera, he did, and he was in a safe area. He was in a protected vehicle, and he was doing this piece to camera, saying the Al-Shabaab guys are really close. I feel this, I feel that, and he was making that drama, and I recognized the road, and I was saying, no, you're lying, and then I said, why did you have to go that far to lie? And he said, sometimes, Jamal, you're telling a news story, you haven't got great access, and you have to make the most of what you have, and you just have to dramatize, he said to me. And I said, that's not journalism. We should make drama films if that's what you're interested in. So I think on many occasions, Western journalists like to sort of exaggerate and talk about themselves and say, this is what I felt, and just show sort of the viewers or the readers the great deal of risk that they have potentially taken to bring this story to them. So, but normally I don't go down that road, and I always focus on the people that I'm reporting from, and the story is about them, not me. And I always say to my producers, less of me is better. Sometimes they say, put that question in, or put that piece to camera in, and I try and minimize my sort of presence in the film. Sometimes it's good to lead the viewers and tell them, I am here and this is what's happening, I'm there and this is what's happening. But to say this is what's happening to me and this is what I feel is something I always avoid doing it. And I don't think it adds anything, or it's a good journalism.
Yeah. You've written about corruption within the journalistic community in Somalia, and the fact that journalists were being paid to report, and often are paid to report for different sides of the issue. And when you did that, you kind of opened up a can of worms, as we say here in Canada. You opened up a can of worms. What motivated you to do that, and how did you react, and how did you deal with the criticism that came at you, which it did, for writing that piece in The Guardian?
I think the motivation was, I go back to Somalia quite often, and I see what these journalists are doing it, and it's not all of them, but I would say most of them are corrupt. And it bothers me because I know as a journalist, I can reach millions of views, and that comes with the responsibility as a journalist. And I mean, responsibility, first thing is telling the truth. sticking. I am a human being. I get things wrong. Every story I do, there are things I always say I could have done this differently. But the key thing is to try and do my best. And the basic of journalism is telling the truth. But if you're not telling the truth, then for me, you're not a journalist. So in a way, that upsets me when I am a Somali, and I can see how journalists, my fellow journalists, are abusing the profession. And also when they are focusing on how much money they can make and who would pay them the most, all the important stories are left out. So they don't necessarily dig deep and look into stories and investigate because they want easy money. The reaction, I would say, there weren't that many journalists who were protesting it. There were a dozen journalists in Mogadishu, and Somalis journalists are across the world, even here in London. And when I'm talking about the corruption within the Somali media, it's including here in London, because a number of Somali televisions are based here. So the reaction, I would say, in general was positive, because I touched on issue that people didn't want to talk about at all. So I kind of opened the door and said, this is what's happening. And I opened the eyes of the public, business people, politicians, and others. And I think that had a huge impact on how journalists practice. And I think it will take a while to see results, but we are already seeing a number of, if you like, things that are happening. For instance, some journalists are saying, let's form a union, let's set up our own union, have self-censorship, and distinguish ourselves from the bad guys. And the government is saying we will register all the media houses. In Somalia, you can set up your own television or radio without being registered. And also the international organizations that work with journalists are saying we will try and train them in terms of ethics. In the past, it was about wear a flat jacket and watch your back. But now they're saying we will try and train them how to be a good journalist, good citizen, if you like. So it will take a while, I think, but I would say the reaction has been very, very positive. In fact, much better than I expected.
What, in your opinion, is the most important job that a journalist does? For a young person looking at becoming a journalist, what do you think you would say to them in terms of the job that you do, and what the important characteristics of a good journalist is?
I think the first thing is to ask yourself, why do you want to become a journalist? And also recognize the power you might have as a journalist. And I think those are very important elements. If you think as a journalist and you play your role positively and you are honest and you try and do your best, as I mentioned, we are all human beings. We get things wrong. You will get things wrong. You learn from it. But if you try your best and you're honest and you're always thinking, why am I doing this story? I think we can make a huge contribution to the society and bridge different cultures, bring people together, expose bad guys, make the world a better place to live for all of us, be on the side of the victims always. So I think, I'm not saying you should all try and expose corruption, but even if you are doing, I was saying to a university student when I went the other day, I support a team called Arsenal, a football team here in London. And I was saying, if you are a sports journalist and you tell me good news about my team, you make me happy. And that is that is a good journalism as far as I'm concerned. I was joking, but what I mean is, if you can save someone's life, someone's suffering, if you can stop bad things that are happening, I think that's what all journalists should focus, regardless of which part of journalism you are. If you're in fashion, you can bring people together through fashion. If you think about that, if you think from that angle, you can always make bigger impact than you think you can. So I would say think about journalism and realize you have a huge power and you can influence millions of people, and that comes with responsibility. And if you practice journalism in a positive manner, then I'm sure you can make a positive contribution and make the world a better place for all of us. And that should be our primary role. Our primary role should be to make our world a better place for everyone.